Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of HITRUST Secrets. I'm Sue Richards, along with Donna Nodson, Steve Dufour, and Jeff McHugh, our core four, as it were, who join mostly every week to talk through anything you've got, any questions you've got, compliance, high trust, regulatory, privacy, security related. So let's kick it off. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions specifically, but I did come prepared to share my SharePoint.
Oh, perfect.
Oh. Yes.
Okay, just to be clear before we start, this was created homegrown from scratch on my own company SharePoint site. So this in no way shares any private or confidential information from any of my clients.
Nice.
Okay,
Fair enough.
Good disclaimer.
all right, here we go. Can you see my screen?
Almost. There it
Almost?
is. Yes.
Okay,
Got it.
all right.
Hey,
Okay,
I
there
saw
we go.
that on LinkedIn. I was wondering
You
what that.
did.
Yeah.
You
I
did.
was looking
Yeah.
how nice that looked.
Yep. So this is a communication site. I left the name up there. So if anybody was looking to figure out what kind of a SharePoint site this is, it's considered a communication site. So in this site, this is a basic web page. I want to be clear. I am not a web developer. That's not in my skill set. SharePoint has templates. I use the templates. The templates are pretty easy to use. So I just, this is one of the other things about SharePoint is that you don't have to have web development skills. They have templates, they've got basics. You can lay out some information, and as long as you have strong background on what information is useful as you go through an assessment, how, there are some things in some circumstances, how a company operates is going to feed into what you need on this particular dashboard. So some companies I work with will have specific teams, and if they're dealing with 400, 500, 600, 850 controls, then it's really important to understand the number of controls per team or per owner and their progress through those on an individual basis. At the other end of the spectrum, you'll have clients doing E1s, and there's 44 controls, and your whole view is probably better as a singular, pie chart or percentage on the total number of requests. But you can play with that, right? So there's all sorts of different specifics that you can have. I kept this one pretty basic, just so folks can get an idea. I do like to have progress somewhere on the dashboard. I like to have what high trust is, because you get in there, and if you've got to reach out to finance or legal or even sometimes new employees who are part of the tech sphere but have never done high trust, they don't know what it is. So just giving a little bit of a background, even if it's a sentence or two, to say this is what it's doing. And then also covering things like what's in scope, right? Because then you get partway through the assessment and you realize somebody's been, spending hours and hours combing through all this evidence across 5 platforms, but 3 of them aren't actually in the scope. So it's important. And that goes especially for tech firms. And I know you're thinking, well, what other kind of a firm would it be? There's a lot of different organizations that could use it. But when you're in the tech space, and then you've also got things that are in your IT sphere, right? So you've got different technical components, that there are some IT things that will need to be included in scope, but it's not everything in IT. And I think it's really important to be clear on what is in scope and how that then, how you need to manage that with regards to additional evidence that needs to be pulled in. Naming the assessor, just so that if people get requests from that external assessor, that they know who they are in the world that we live in of all sorts of scams and everything else. They're more likely to not engage appropriately, because that's what we train them to do, is not engage if they don't recognize it, or have some sort of awareness that somebody is going to be contacting them. I'm just going to keep going through. Feel free to jump in if you've got questions. Key dates. So give everybody a timeline. Make sure it's a good tight timeline. If you've got some extra time built in for the assessor's QA or something, you don't need to post that for everybody. That's your wiggle room. You need people to hit their dates. And those are their key dates. You have to be able to achieve and make sure you're making your progress. If you use up all of your wiggle room, or the teams use it as their planned time, then you don't have any wiggle room. And as we all know, HITRUST is very unforgiving with their deadlines, especially if you're on a renewal. If you're a first timer, float away. You can float for 5 years. I've seen it done.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's important. One of the things I would put in there is that, and have that top of mind is the 90-day window that you have for field work, because that's always a big consideration,
mhm,
especially if somebody is delaying their submission, because that could
mhm.
potentially change and you may need to get some of the other evidence in there.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And
yeah,
on
I
this
love the look
one,
of it.
yeah, on this one, the time frame here I made a little bit shorter. This is a time frame which might be more appropriate for, let's say, an E1 or even an I1 recert. But I would encourage folks, if you're not on an R2 or a full I1, it doesn't take 90 days. Save yourself the hassle and save your teams from droning on and on at a drip pace. Just get it done. It doesn't need to take more than 6 weeks for one of the shorter assessments. And I've never heard anybody at the end of an assessment go, "Oh, this was so much
Wish
fun.
we'd
I could
taken
have."
longer. Yeah. But conversely,
Never.
if
No
it's a
one.
recert, if you've already got one, you don't want to go too soon either. That, if your current certification doesn't run out until June, you don't want to submit in March. So you may want to
Actually,
delay it and show, you know,
yes. So, but I want to be careful because an I1 recert is actually the interim,
correct.
and that can be submitted early. That doesn't
Right.
change
Yeah.
your certification date. When you're recertifying on the big certification year for an R2 or an I1, you're absolutely correct. You don't want to submit early because it will cannibalize your certification time. And whatever your date of submission is, if you submitted 2 weeks before your deadline and it's your main R2 or your main I1, you're just wasting 2 weeks of certification.
Right.
Um,
Right. But
my suggestion is
there is good
48 hours.
planning to do before then so
Mhm.
that you're ready on,
Yes.
the first day of field work starting, you're ready to go. But
Yes.
I have a question about certification date.
Sure.
So let's say your hypothetical company has an R2 they keep and
Hmm.
they maintain. The end of their fiscal year, right? Let's just say is December 31st, right? It just lines up with the calendar year.
Yeah.
Um, I have you guys seen in your experience where the fiscal year ends at a particular time and thus the planning for the next fiscal year and all the budgets and all that other stuff doesn't align one with HITRUST and then two, the second part is the security plans, right? Because part of an R2, you need to do a risk assessment, you need to like communicate plans and risk treatments and all those other things. If those dates don't align, you might be doing your security risk assessment in March
Hmm.
along with your plans and your executive communication, but the
Hmm.
budgets were finalized 6 months prior. So like there's those dates aren't always aligned. Do you guys have a
Yeah.
preference?
I would encourage them not to be aligned.
Okay.
Don't cram everything into one go. HITRUST doesn't need to be aligned with the end of your fiscal year. And if the end of your fiscal year is December 31st, save yourself the headache. Nobody wants to do this at Christmas. Nobody wants to be writing, corrective action plans between Christmas and New Year's. It's not fun. So save yourself the hassle. It doesn't have to align with the end of your fiscal year. Really, the only thing you need to do is make sure you've planned the budget.
correct. Yeah. And usually you're doing that planning in October and you can look out for the next year and see,
Mhm.
okay, well, in March, we're going to need to do that risk assessment. And in June, we're going to need to do that high trust assessment and do it, budget it that way. But I agree with Donna. And it's funny because if you do try to submit something at the end of like October and you're delayed by a week or two, it seems like everybody and their brother is trying to submit to HITRUST. And obviously, HITRUST wants to take some time off also. So I've had times where a 2 week delay on submission has meant a month and a half, like a 6 week delay on a QA, getting a QA time slot in. And so
Yeah.
all of a sudden, your October is mid-January. And they've done it. I mean, HITRUST has come through, but that's their QA reservation date. So that's the date, when you're submitting on October 30th, that's the date that you have to tell your customers, well, yeah, we tried to get it in, but, we originally were planning on October 15th and we had to reschedule it. And now HITRUST commits to having a report back to us in January.
Yeah.
Maybe they can
Well,
get it in
it's
November,
important
maybe they get it December, but
yeah, it's important to understand though that HITRUST actually has processing activities that go on between the submission date and the QA date. So if you have a submission date, say because you're required to put one in when you schedule your QA. So if you have a submission date of October 15th and your QA date is, say, your week is between October 31st and whatever, it's, kind of that it starts October 31st. If you say, oh, well, my QA doesn't start until October 31st, so I don't have to hit October 15th, that's not correct. HITRUST has processing that they need to do. And if you miss that October 15th date, there will be financial penalties. You will lose your QA date. I would, if you're at risk for it, you need to communicate with your assessor, communicate with HITRUST, and you need to make sure that you're figuring out what your new plan is. You can't just be late and assume that you can use that time. HITRUST has a team that receives the evidence, looks through my CSF to make sure everything's kind of in order as expected before it ever gets to their QA team. And it's important that they have that time to do it.
yeah. And there's no penalty for rescheduling your QA date as long as you do it before. They have a date I think it's 2 weeks before your submission date. There's no penalty to reschedule except for the fact that if you miss that window, we had a great window of, middle of November for a QA block, and then suddenly it was the middle of January for a 2 week delay. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, because we can't hit this date. We have to submit. So I think it was even probably mid-September that we recognized, we're not going to get there. Might have been even early September. And it was like, well, yeah, well, now now wait until 2026 for the reservations filled up. So it does seem like a lot of companies do try to get that submission in by the end of the year, but I'm with Donna. I would not try to plan it for that. I would plan it for Q1 or Q2. Well, probably Q2 because Q1 would be all of your prep, and then Q2 is gathering all your evidence. So you're not trying to do a bunch of prep at the end of the year when people are not very concerned about what's going to happen in the following year.
Absolutely. And you can actually take some of those annual activities. So you have to update your policies and procedures. You have to, take steps in the meantime to make sure you're ready with everything. And I find it fascinating that some companies just don't do this and they wait for the assessment. So you can actually create a dashboard like this for your annual activities. When are the policies and procedures? I'm working with another client who has new lead counsel stepping into a compliance officer role, and she and I've collaborated. She's got an entire calendar of the compliance activities that are required, individuals' own tasks. We've actually set it up very much like an evidence request list. It looks like this, and everybody then has their own lists. So you can use this for evidence requests, which I have in this demonstration, but you can use it for annual compliance activities too, and then set it up so that everybody's got their own little view and their own calendar, and they don't have to think about which are the policies that I'm supposed to be responsible for, because it's always going to be on their board. And you can organize it with some, I'm not going to say great levels of automation, unless you can get somebody to do the coding for you, but it's not bad. It really isn't. All right, so let me go back over to here just for a minute, and I'll show you a little bit more of how I got this set up, and then we'll toggle back into my evidence request list. So guidance, I've got instructions for the team, because a lot of the teams, again, they do this once a year, right? So it's not their full-time job, but it is mine. So this, it's a refresh on, oh, right, okay, where do I go? How do I, click around? What's the status I put things when I'm done? And then I'll have a link that's all items. And then I create individual links for each of the team members. That way, when somebody clicks through, they don't have to see the crazy big list of everybody's evidence, because that begets delays. I want to procrastinate. I don't want to look at that list. It feels impossible to tackle. So I'm going to think about that tomorrow.
100%.
What I want to do is encourage people to look at it today and gamify it a little bit more, right? Oh, I can click, I can make mine all done. Those are good things, right? So that's how I've basically set it up here. And then I've also created some additional sections. And this will make more sense when I show you the details of the evidence request list. But this section is based on issues. So if somebody has flagged the issue button and wanted to ask a question, usually there's weekly sessions with an assessor. Then you don't have to chase down a dozen different people to find out who's got questions or sift through your emails. As the project lead, you can just go here and go, oh, right, okay, here are all the items that have been tagged for issues, and here are the questions that they have. And you can ask the questions and get answers on their behalf. Some people are able to attend the weekly meetings with the assessors, others aren't. But this makes it really easy to figure out which items are blocked and which ones need additional information.
How do you get all of the requests in there? Right. So like for an R2 with 300 requests or whatever it is, right? Like that you as a, and
Sure.
well, not you as an assessor,
I'll show you that.
got that by giant list.
Yeah. So it's that's an import, and you have to do it at the same time. So I wait until the assessor has their evidence request list. And then I do an export, and I make sure that the assessor, so I let them know what I'm doing, and I make sure that they have a request ID, right? And that their request ID does not change for the duration of the assessment. That way, if I'm going in and I say, we've got a question on R004, everybody's on the same page about what that is. If they go and start adding new lines in the middle and they've just readjusted all the numbering, that's bad. That's bad. But that way you can load it in. There's still some manual setup that needs to happen because I want to set up my statuses and my phases, and SharePoint doesn't like importing those types of things. So you have to go in, you have to set up, what do I want for the options on this? And then you can work from there. I number them because I like them. If I want to sort them in order, I want them to follow in the order that I want. So I tend to number things. Phases are the same. So here are the policies and procedures. That's what they tend to be starting up front, maybe some of the inventory lists, and population lists. And then I'll go into other things that are evidence-based. And the assessors do this too, right? It's not rocket science that a lot of the assessors set it up this way. Then they'll go into, here's the things that we need that don't require sampling. And then phase 3 are usually the things that do require samples that are based on phase 1 population files. So we'll go through, set it all up. I like the control references because that helps anybody who's trying to cross-reference and see, well, what else is this maybe connected to? So I could copy that, do a filter, and find out all the evidence bits that are connected to that control. You can also use it to include inheritance, right? So, and that's manual. If I just go in and say, right, I'm going to update all these. But what you can do is edit it. This is like a big Excel sheet, right? So if I wanted to say, hey, I'm going to use this for all of these, it doesn't have to be big. I can just grab it. So if I wanted to copy that down, just drag it. It's very easy. Now, it doesn't have to look like that. You can change it back. You can have drop-down lists this way, but I can also drag this. So if I wanted to use that status all the way down, I just put my key right there and I drag it all the way. So that's where if you're using controls to filter and you know that control, applies to or is covered by a few different pieces of evidence and you've got inheritance on it, put it in, drag it down. It's pretty easy to do. When you take the time to set it up, it then just works like magic. And this is where a lot of folks, I think, don't set up anything before. I've actually begged assessors. I'm like, can you just give me the evidence request list in advance? I will not share it with the team. No one will collect evidence. I promise. I just want to set up my board. That way, when we kick off on the exact day that the window opens, I already have all of this done. I have everybody's individual boards set up. I've already done the legwork and everybody can start immediately. So that's sorry, go ahead.
This is really cool. I mean, I don't know that my mind could have done this.
My mind didn't do this the very first time I did HITRUST. It's kind of been a work in progress over the years, but now I can jump in and go, right, okay, I know I need to do all these steps. I know they're worth it. And when I go through, I can then make this easy and quick for everybody, right? So we've just touched on really the inbound setup part. Who's the owner? What's the due date? That goes hand in hand. Sometimes it's, I'll have to kick it out a little bit if somebody's on vacation or they need some extra time because they have another project. So usually I try and get all of those to tie in with phases, but sometimes it has to deviate a little. And then I'm going to click this open and show you. So this is the detailed view, and you can actually adjust this. So if you don't want all of the fields showing, they don't have to show. You can actually hide some of them. You can also create a form for this list if you were doing something different. I don't know. I can't think of a form version with HITRUST, but with the evidence collection. But you can create a form, and you can make that form look like anything you want. So if you wanted to create a form, where is it? Maybe I've not got it right here. Edit in grid view. No, I don't see my form. Oh, here it is. I had a click. So you can create forms and they can include all or as few of the fields as you want. And this form, so you can use a list for anything. I use it on some of my clients for like operations requests. So I'll create a list dashboard for myself, and then I'll create a request form so that they can send me requests for changes, because I'll use SharePoint for internal sites for companies. I'll create those, create the content, curate the content, and people can send me requests to say, hey, can we have a new page for this? We've got a team who wants to understand the difference between a wet signature and a digital signature, and they also want everybody else in the company to know. So create a whole page, and they've just send it through, it pops up on my dashboard, and then I can address it. But the form can live anywhere on the site. All right, sidetracked. I'll get back to evidence requests and fun with that. So I just put in all the fields, the inheritance. Now that I tend to limit to just inheritance that comes through my CSF, but you can make it a text where it's different inheritance options. If you want it to include reliance, you can do that too. You can make the fields do whatever you want. The owner field, I've created it here as a text field, but you can create it as a person field, where they're using SharePoint as an organization. So then you can plug in the names of employees who work in the organization and then use this little comments area and you can tag them in comments. So I've only been able to tag myself because I'm the only one. But you can write comments to say, oh, hey, I checked with the assessor on this and this is what they said. And then these are time date stamped so that you can look at that and go, oh, okay, yeah, I can see the progress on this evidence. We've got the evidence notes. So I encourage people, if they had to go to a specific place to get this, or it was a policy evidence request, but that policy isn't standalone, it's part of some other policy, write it down. Stop having to look for it again next year. Just write it down. Change the status. So I collected the evidence. So I switched it over to collected. And then as the the person who's running the assessment from the inside, the client organization, can take a look at the evidence and go, yes, I agree, that's ready to send through the assessor. And then you can put it in submitted. Once the assessor says, yes, we agree, that's acceptable, you can flip it over to accepted, or if they kick it back, it goes to returned. And if it's a sample that you don't have the samples yet, it's on hold. That's how I do it. You can come up with your own status options. And then the files. So I like the hyperlink fields here. Now I tend to use multiple hyperlinks. So if I have a client and we know where the previous evidence is, I will create 2 hyperlink fields, and one will say previous evidence, and then the next one says new evidence. And then I create a folder with the request number and it can be the control number. If there's too many controls, you might have to abbreviate a bit, but you can put that in there and then put all the files in here. And for the assessor's benefit, I usually include the request number on there. I don't usually include the long viewits anymore, because HITRUST MyCSF has both HITRUST and Microsoft get a little finicky with some of the longer file names. They tend to stumble on them. So I'll just use the request number and then I'll say what it is, right? Whatever the evidence, this shows, this sort of network security. I recommend against using names when it comes to sampling. So if you have to sample employees, if you have your 27 samples, number them or put alphanumeric, this is sample A, sample B, sample C, whatever you want to do, but take the person's name out of it, because their name doesn't need to be in a file that could then be somehow represented or accidentally captured on one of the many reports that HITRUST has. So just food for thought. It's a way around it. I encourage my clients to use sample numbering conventions that way, and use the same, right? So if they picked these 27 samples and they're going to be sampled for onboarding, sampled for training, sampled for whatever it is, keep their numbers the same across everything. So Donna is always sample 1, Susan is always sample 2, Steve is always sample 3, and so on. That way it doesn't deviate. The assessors know consistently who that sample is supposed to be, and you don't have to use their name in the file.
I have a question about that. So you're essentially saying create a mapping. You have your employee list in which they might pull sample, and you do like A001 in autofill for all your employees or contractors or whoever you're gathering evidence for. What happens when the naming convention for the company for a computer is Steve.Dufour, like as the computer name, which would be part of your evidence?
Yes. So my apologies. I don't apply the alphanumeric codes or whatever to the samples before they're selected. I apply them afterwards to avoid having the names used in file names. So usually people would, they'd get the 27 names that they're supposed to pull evidence for, and then they'd put D. Nodson, in all of the files related to my samples. And my suggestion is simply don't put employee names in the samples. It's unnecessary, but make sure everybody's on the same page to say, here's the employee samples, or the workforce samples, right? So these might be employees, these might be contractors, maybe these are of the employees, the new hires, these are the terms. Just once the assessors have selected the samples, assign the alphanumeric codes, and everybody, and make it simple. I'm not saying make it like AZ39. Just make it basic. But if everybody can stay on the same page, then it will make life easier, and you can still keep a bit of privacy, so that you're not exposing your employees' names unnecessarily.
Thanks.
Right. So that's where the files are kept. And then, the instruction to the team members is just drop your files here. They don't actually have to do anything with the naming conventions. I'll just pop right in here and then say, oh, okay, I'm going to rename this, right? So you can do this with folders, files, whatever you need. You can just rename it. And then once you're done with it, then it can go over to the assessor. And then I usually color the folder, but that's me.
I was thinking the same thing, and I was like, you know what? Then you can have it that it's green because it's done, or
Yeah, 100%.
so.
So once it's been submitted, you can
Yep.
change that over to green. Everybody knows you're done. And then, as the person who's managing the assessment from the inside, you know exactly what your outliers are, and you know that they should coincide directly with your master list. So here at the bottom, just to finish off the last couple of fields here, this is where I've got my issues tag, and it's just a yes or no checkbox. And then this is the description that I use, whatever the question is. So, this is my setup. I won't say it looks exactly like this for all my clients. It's customized a little bit here and there to make sure it meets their needs. But it works.
And then you invite them as an external user to come in and work here, or do you take this and deploy it?
Their environment.
Okay, so you deploy it in their environment.
And I know the answer is it depends, but how long does it take to set up?
It doesn't take me long now, but I imagine if it was the first go for somebody, it would take a little bit of time. But it genuinely, so if I had the evidence request, and let's say there's 500, you go up here, you go to your site contents. Microsoft really should pay me for this. You go to, so you can see the list here, and you can do a new list. Now, what you don't want to do is create a list. What you want to do is import from Excel. So take a look at the columns you want. Make sure you only import the columns you need. If it's phases and that sort of thing, those are things that you can import them if you want. But if you want to designate your drop-down list, you're still going to need to refresh it once you get it in. But if the assessor has phases listed, it can be useful. You just create a new column right next to it, and then you can drag and drop, straight down the list. And it's a bit quicker than having to do an individual pick for each line, especially if you're working with hundreds.
Wow. Okay.
So,
very cool.
Yeah. And just to demonstrate that a little bit further, there is a little bit of a walkthrough. It'll say, does your list have headers? How do you want to classify this? You need to do like date fields and that sort of thing. But if I wanted to, for example, create a new field, I'm going to add in a new field right now where it's got choice. I'm going to say it's status 2. So maybe I imported the status from the assessor, but I decided I wanted my very own status options because I didn't like theirs. But I want them to roughly coincide. So I'm going to put my status column there. I'm going to edit it. This first one, I'm going to put there, right? And then I can just drag and drop. It does. Now I realize I'm demonstrating this with, a dozen lines. And the reality is there's usually a lot more when you're looking at an assessment. But the value of this setup, when somebody then comes in and goes, right, okay, I'm Aria, I have one item. I only need to look at that one. We go over to George. George has a few, but he also knows exactly which one he has to work on first, which one he's already done, right? And you can curate these. So if I wanted to say, once George has selected it's in collected, then he doesn't need to see that anymore. So I might go here and go, oh, okay, I only want George to see when it's his name and the status is still pending.
Or returned or something like that. Yeah.
Right. So it can be pending, you show more columns. So people will get stuck and think there's only 2, but you can add more. And so you can then go back and curate that so that they don't have to see everything. Once it is done on their end, then they don't have to look at it anymore. And some people prefer that. They can also reassign it, which is, one of the banes of existence for if you're trying to navigate through evidence and somebody's like, that's not me, that's so-and-so. And you're like, okay, where are we storing all this? How do I, shifting the ownership over on whatever list you're managing. And instead, if you want to, I'm going to put Aria because I've got her board. I'm going to shift that over to Aria, and then I'm going to close it. And I usually encourage my teams, I'm like, if you're going to change an owner, just pop me a note. I switched this to Aria because of hers. Right. So then I've got a time date stamp. I know who made the change, over it went. And then if I click on Aria's board, Aria now has 2 items.
Yeah, and that's convenient so that you don't have to be the babysitter. You can just go, okay, if it's not yours, you don't need to let me know. Just change it, and then we'll look at it the
Assign
next.
it.
Yeah, we'll look at it in the next one.
Yes.
But yeah, and then you've got all that version history. So if they're just bouncing it between, you'll be like, okay, somebody needs to own this.
Yeah, and you've got the version history. You can also say, right, if you're not sure who owns it, pop it back to me. And again, if they write a note to say, hey, this was on my board, but I don't know, so I'm going to send it back to the assessment project manager,
Right.
then at least I know who it was assigned to, who said already it's not theirs, and then I can figure out who owns it. And reassign it from there. So you can make your own board, even if you're not directly expected to collect any evidence or have access to collect any evidence, as is usually my case. It then allows you management, and the team can, kind of just make it a lot faster. They don't have to sit there on their board and go, well, half these things aren't even mine.
Right. Right. They can
These
take
are
care of
things
it. Yeah.
regularly here, right?
Yep.
So,
Or they can raise it as an issue, and that way you can talk about it whenever
Mhm.
you have your next status meeting. And I do like the fact that you're installing it at your client site, because then
yes,
a year from now, 2 years from now, when they're going through this again, they'll look at it and go, oh, Aria did that
yes,
last time. And so
yes,
now I know, it's either that person or whoever replaced that role. And so it's
yes.
very easy then to switch it over, and you've got that continuity, and then they can look at it. And I love the fact that you've got the prior evidence,
Mhm.
and it's right there at their fingertips, so they don't have to try to go find it. They can go, well, what did you guys use last time?
Yes.
And
And you
go,
can
well,
do
that was
naming.
acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah, you can include the year or whatever you want in the naming convention. That way you can find things. I always encourage the year to go first
Yes.
in files, dashboards, that sort of thing, for HITRUST, because then you can go back and figure out what was done. And if you want to save it, but you don't want people to look at it anymore, it's really easy. You just take it off of the navigation, remove it. It doesn't delete the page. It just takes it off the navigation. And then you can go to site contents and your page is still there. See? Then you can copy the link and put it back on the navigation if you want.
Great.
So I am, the reason I'm a big fan of SharePoint is because it genuinely makes things easier. And the setup time is worth it. It's worth it. Everything then flows through. Being able to come in the morning and go, oh, okay, right. What's my collected list look like? So this is what I need to submit through to the assessor. Super easy. And then once I submit it, I change that from collected over to submitted, and then it falls off the list. It will fall off if I get enough time, but I am impatient, so I tend to refresh. I don't have to look at things.
I love the organization.
It's really good.
It's like I said, it's one of those things that I've built up and curated over the years, but it makes life so much easier. And just having a bit of a visual place to go. I realize this is busy. I was trying to show a lot of options for what you can put on the board. You can make it as busy or as clean as you want. But just trying to make it so that people can see things at a glance, is very key. And then going through and having the individual, lists that people can access. So they don't have to save their links. They can just go to this page and they can all find their links. They can save them if they want. But then imagine the option to have different lists for people who need to do the compliance during the year, right? So you're looking at different compliance activities. I could create a whole other dashboard that is all about compliance. And that's what one of my clients did. She was a very quick study on SharePoint. And she created an entire list of all the compliance activities that need to be done through the year. So everything from making the QA reservation and securing the assessor contract, to policy and procedure reviews and pen tests and everything. And then we basically reversed it into each team had their own page, their own dashboard that said, hey, these are the things that you have due this month. And she, had put in all the due dates. And then once they did it that month, they could, depending on what the cadence was, they can put, right, this is the next month thing. So then put next month's date. And then it would pop into a future, to-dos list down further on the page so that they only had to deal with their things due that month.
That's nice.
Mm-hmm. Makes it a lot easier. And once you get the ball rolling on that kind of stuff, then you're sitting really pretty for your next assessment.
Well, I mean, you said something at the beginning that really stuck with me. When you're looking at a list, it can become overwhelming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why, I use the customized views exponentially. You can't have too many views. If somebody wants a custom view for issues, for themselves, for some other reason, it is so easy to create one. And it's just not even worth it to say, oh, well, we should only keep 5 main views. It doesn't matter. You want a custom view? I'll create 3 different views for George if it makes him go faster during a HITRUST audit. But these are the main pages that I use. They're not the only pages, certainly, on a SharePoint site. I do tend to use heavily the documents, all integrated. But let me also just show you a little bit behind the scenes on the editing side. So this is what it looks like when we go to edit it. So there are different areas of a page, and I'll show you what it looks like from scratch as well. But this is the header section of the page. SharePoint has a newer, it's not new, but it's newer, flexible screen. So it used to be you had to choose 1, 2, or 3 columns, or you could do split third left, split third right. That was it. And your boxes had to go exactly like that. That's no longer the case. I actually rarely use anything except the flexible one now. And then you can design it. You can make the color background, any background you want, within SharePoint limits. This one, for example, is one of their custom designs. So they have some sort of a snazzy background going on. You can do that. There are customizations that I could show, but I'll keep it simple for this moment. Yeah. You can decide if you want this to be collapsible. So if you say you want a collapsible summary section, just typing in, maybe I want a new text box, and I can drag and drop from the box below. Here, summary of HITRUST. If I decide I want this button up here, I can do that and just drag it up. Or from is exactly lined up the way it's supposed to be. Just totally geeked out there, but
some insight into your personality. That's all, Donna.
You can use, hero images. So you can link to several other pages on the site. If each of the teams have their own sites, you can do that here. Here's a link. We'll share the folders. I don't even think that this wouldn't even really be a good link for something like this, but it'll just say, right, this is documents, and you can go to the back. You can do play around with it quite a bit. For a hero section, usually there are other pages, and they'll have whatever the image is at the top. That's what will pop here. So it's very useful if you use consistent imagery for your different pages, and then you do a hero image where it'll have 4 or 5 different images here that you can click on. people will start to know, oh, okay, this, big lock with cyber wires coming out, that's a cybersecurity page, right? And when they go there, the visuals at the top. It doesn't seem like a lot, but you'd be surprised how much faster people move through sites when the visuals are consistent and form a pattern. Any other kind of types of functionality people want to see? You can upload images, you can do quick charts, site activity.
I honestly, I didn't know that all of this was here. So
yeah, it's like I said, SharePoint, it's right there, and it has so many features that
yeah,
it's already included in your Microsoft subscription in most cases. So I'll last before we go. I'm sorry, I know we're coming up on the hour season. This might have been more than you
Oh, no,
anticipated.
this is great.
Okay. So if I go back to site contents, I'll just show you quickly how to create a new page. So you can create a new list, page, document library. So document library is useful. You can store all your documents in one library, but if you wanted to put that library as a link or visual on another page, that's when it's useful. Or if you want them to have individual fields, that's when it's useful to have a different document library. So if I wanted to have all the contracts for clients in one library, for my legal counsel, I don't want it cluttered with a bunch of other documents. So I'm going to create a separate document library just for that. And it can live here on the backside. So you can create document libraries or apps. I'm going to create a page just for the sake of doing that quick demonstration before we wrap up today. Oh, that didn't give me the templates that it usually does. That's interesting. So depending on where you create things from in SharePoint, it gives you different options. It's very strange. Let's see. Let's pick a template. So I'm going to pick this template. So it then automatically starts and will import some things for you. Or if you decide you want, these are section templates, sorry, not full pages. I want to show you the full page template. I'm going to go backwards for just a minute because I want to show you. It usually gives options. Here we go. Here. So if you go to the homepage of your SharePoint site, you can then pick any one of these templates. If you're going for basic policies and procedures, which is another really good use of SharePoint, don't use templates. Just start with a basic page. That way it's not too cluttered to start. You can add in little images here or there to make it interesting. And clickable links, which is great for avoiding saying the same policy in multiple places, which is very bad practice. But this type of page allows you to jump in and go, oh, okay, right. I want something that's going to look interesting, that's going to already be set up to do some basic things. This is the one that I chosen. You'll recognize it for the landing page that I did. And when I started it, right, so it gives me these things that I said, right, I'm just going to use that template. And then it put a bunch of things together. I didn't have to create everything. Now, I like a right-hand navigation, so I added that straight away. And then I decided I didn't want it to be white because I tend to like darker navigation wraps. So I made it dark, and then I started from there and used the backgrounds that were already in place. 2:59. I'm going to take a breath and see if anybody has any questions.
keep on going. Remember, this is not a hard stop, right?
Exactly.
Right. Does anybody want me to dive into any particular functionality or demonstrate how to create something that I maybe breezed past?
Well, I think the
Connect to a
question,
database,
Can I connect to a database?
like a SQL database or Postgres?
So it can. I can't show you how to do that, but it absolutely can connect to a database. So I want to go back. There are different options in terms of connecting. So there's analytics. There's also where's my list page? So you can do automation. Nope, that's not my list page. So this is the list I want. This will go with Power BI. Where's Power BI? I know it does Power BI. Flows, rules, quick steps, Power Apps. It connects. You can connect it to databases. I've seen it done where it's pulling data out like counts or statistics or, trying to get runs on things. So I've seen companies use it for bug counts is a big thing, right? So they'll have like a tech dashboard and it'll give the regular bug counts and how many of them at different levels of bugs and how long it's taking their average resolution rate. So those are some of the types of things that I've seen done, which is how I know it can be done. But I also know I'm not the one to do it.
Just a quick question on those overall dates that you had, because I saw you had an event list. Do you put them there, or for this demo, was that just kind of included on the page, or would you use events to show starting the assessment, when it's submitted, et cetera?
Yeah, you can use an event list.
Okay.
If I was running this for a very large corporation, a very significant entity with a team that was likely going to be 20 or 30 people, bye, Steve. I would probably use an event list in addition to some of the key dates to say, hey, because these key dates are good, but that's not a meeting list, right? So then I might have, here's the kickoff meeting that we want to do, or here are the kickoff meetings for designated teams. Because if it gets too big, then it can be very difficult to answer questions. And then you can have an event list. So it just depends on the level of circumstance that's appropriate for the team you're working with. If it's 5 people, even, this is good, but it's probably a lot for 5 people.
Yeah. But I mean, it's definitely good for organizing everything and having it ready to go. Because I mean, typically people are using SharePoint just maybe for folders and not having these links in there. So then it's manually going back and doing that. The other question is
for folders, and then they think that's
right. It's like I did
crazy.
it. Well, and it is a step up, because instead of everybody having a copy of a spreadsheet that gets emailed around, at least it's in a folder and everybody can go there, and kind of look at it that way. But the other thing is like for policies, because like if you're doing an R2, a policy document is going to hit on a bunch of different controls. And so would you have it in one spot and then just use a link in those evidence requests?
Yeah. So you can PDF a page, and I have regularly done that for policies on SharePoint. So you can just print a PDF of the policy page. But the other thing that having policies on SharePoint does is you can go to the version history. Oh, it shows everything. It shows everything. It will show you where are the changes, right? And it'll then show you all the changes that were made on that version. It shows you who made the changes. Where there are workflow approvals built into SharePoint, it'll show you who approved the changes. So all of a sudden, life gets so much better when you've got to verify what was changed at different points for policies and procedures. If you want to have your version history at the bottom, you still can. But this then makes sure that you have an actual track record of everything that has been changed in that policy.
Nice.
Yeah,
I do. I think this is great. When I look at things, I'm looking at it from the little guy's perspective, and I know HITRUST is not always for the little guys. But when I think of it from a small guy's perspective, this just makes their lives so much easier.
It does. And one of the best things about having the centralized information on SharePoint for the smaller teams, where you look at this and go, is that overkill for 5 people? Well, how many of those people might leave before the next HITRUST assessment?
Yeah.
And how much time and effort in a small organization does the company spend on documenting processes, like where
Right.
you found the evidence last time? And this then makes it so easy. And you can also see who found it, right? So if George quits and then Gianna comes in, you can say, oh, right, okay, so since Gianna replaced George, let's go ahead and make sure that those controls are now assigned to Gianna, because probably makes sense. I realize roles aren't always one for one, but it's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah. Well, have
If
you
you want to
shared
get
this?
super fancy, you can have a whole controls repository and hyperlink those. I might have done that once before.
Okay. So, are you willing to share this with others?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
I'm happy to share, happy to do training programs on this. I will coach and teach people. This is something that I really enjoy, and I think it's so incredibly useful, and it can make a massive difference, especially on a very detailed initiative like HITRUST, because there's so many moving parts, and people see HITRUST. And Jeff, I know you saw my post on LinkedIn where I said, if you don't like HITRUST, you're doing it wrong, because
Exactly.
literally lays out the steps in bite size on how to achieve things like HIPAA compliance, regulatory compliance, all the data privacy you need, and strong cybersecurity posture. It gives you the stepping stones, and you just follow the path, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't get easier than that. Cybersecurity isn't easier than that on any day. It's quicker if you want to take the shortcut, and you're going to end up wherever it is you end up, because that's
Right. That's where shortcuts put you.
For a reason.
That's
But this just makes it easy.
Yes. Yep. It does.
Perfect. Well, thanks.
I love it. Oh, and we're still recording, aren't we? So
We are. I
We-
can stop
we
the
are
recording
recording.
now.
Yeah. So for anybody, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to do individual sessions.